The blizzard's gift, the wind on Arcturus 7, didn't just howl, it screamed. Lieutenant Marcus Kane pulled his thermal hood tighter against his face as ice crystals bit into any exposed skin. The blizzard had come from nowhere, turning his routine, perimeter sweep into a fight for survival. His GPS flickered weakly before dying completely, leaving him with only instinct and 20 years of military experience to guide him back to base. Through the white-out conditions, Marcus spotted a dark shape huddled against a cluster of frozen rocks. His hand instinctively moved to his sidearm, then stopped. The figure wasn't moving in the aggressive, purposeful way of an enemy combatant. It was curled inward, shivering, violently, the desperate posture of someone dying from the cold. As he approached, Marcus could see it was a woman, but not human. Her skin held a pale, almost luminescent quality that seemed to glow faintly against the snow. Delicate ridges traced along her temples and down her neck, and her hair was white as starlight, though whether by nature or from frost, he couldn't tell. She wore thin, torn clothing that offered no protection against Arcturus 7's brutal climate. "Hey," Marcus called out, his voice barely audible over the storm. Her eyes fluttered open, large, silver-blue orbs that seemed to hold depths, like ocean water. She looked at him with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. She tried to speak, but only weak gasps emerged from her blue-tinged lips. Hypothermia was setting in fast. Marcus had maybe minutes before she'd slip into unconsciousness permanently. Military. Protocol was clear. Unknown alien contacts were to be reported immediately. No unauthorized interaction. No aid without clearance. But protocol hadn't accounted for watching someone freeze to death while he radioed for permission that might never come. Marcus made his choice. He dropped his pack and pulled out his emergency bivouac, a one-person survival shelter designed for extreme weather. The metallic fabric crackled as he shook it out, then activated the thermal generator. Within seconds, the small space began to warm. "Come on," he said, reaching for the woman. She recoiled initially, but when she felt the warmth radiating from the shelter, she allowed him to guide her inside. The space was cramped, designed for one person, not two. Marcus zipped the entrance closed and activated his emergency sleeping bag's heating elements. The woman's shivering was so violent it shook the entire shelter. Without hesitation, Marcus unzipped the sleeping bag fully and gestured for her to get inside. When she hesitated, he pointed to himself, then to her, then made a sharing gesture with his hands. Her eyes widened in understanding. She nodded weakly and crawled into the bag. Marcus slipped in beside her, zipping it closed around them both. The proximity was intimate, necessary, and completely against every regulation he'd ever learned. Her body was like ice against his, but gradually, incrementally, he felt her shivering begin to slow. They lay there in the small, warm cocoon as the blizzard raged outside, two beings from different worlds sharing the most basic gift one could offer another, the warmth of life itself. In the dim glow of the thermal unit, Marcus watched her breathing steady and her color slowly return. He had no idea who she was, where she'd come from, or what this moment would cost him. He only knew that when she whispered a word that sounded like Zara and touched her chest, then looked at him with gratitude that transcended language, he'd made the right choice. The storm continued to howl, but inside their shared shelter something else was beginning, something that would change both their lives forever. Language of the heart, Marcus woke to the gentle sound of breathing that wasn't his own. The blizzard had passed sometime during the night, leaving an eerie silence across the frozen landscape. Zara was still pressed against him in the sleeping bag, her silver blue eyes open and watching him with curious intensity. "Morning," he said softly, unsure if she understood. She tilted her head, then repeated the sound back to him. "Morning," with a musical quality that made the words sound like a song. He carefully extracted himself from the sleeping bag and checked his equipment. His radio crackled to life with static and the concerned voice of Sergeant Torres back at base. "Kane, report your position. You missed check-in." Marcus glanced at Zara, who had pulled the sleeping bag around herself like a cocoon, watching him intently. Storm hit harder than expected, he replied into the radio. Taking shelter. We'll be back by 1400 hours. Copy that. Don't make us send a search party. When he ended the transmission, Zara pointed at the radio, then at him, making a questioning gesture. Marcus realized she was trying to understand the concept of communication at a distance. He held up the device and spoke into it, then pointed toward where the base lay beyond the horizon. Her eyes lit up with understanding. She reached into her torn clothing and pulled out what looked like a crystalline pendant. She spoke into it, in her melodic language, waited, then shook her head sadly when nothing happened. Marcus understood. Her people's equivalent was broken or out of range. Over the next few hours, they developed their own form of communication. Marcus would point to objects and say their names: snow, rock, sky. Zara would repeat them, then offer her own words in return. When she pointed to herself and said Zara clearly, he smiled and pointed to himself. Marcus. She tried it several times. Marcus, until she got it right, then clapped her hands together in delight. The simple joy in her expression made something warm bloom in his chest. Using gestures and drawings in the snow, Zara began to tell her story. She drew what looked like a large ship, then showed it breaking apart with her hands. She pointed to the sky, then to herself, indicating she had fallen from above. When she drew stick figures, some running toward a smaller ship, others scattered, Marcus understood she'd been separated from her people during an evacuation. Marcus pulled out his emergency rations and shared them with her. She examined each item carefully before eating, as if memorizing flavors from another world. When she handed him a small, translucent fruit from her own supplies, somehow preserved despite her ordeal, he tasted something like starlight and honey. As the day wore on, Marcus found himself reluctant to return to base. Zara seemed to sense his conflict. She touched his uniform, then pointed toward the horizon where his base lay hidden. She made a pushing gesture, as if telling him to go, but her eyes held a question he recognized. Will you come back? Marcus took her hand, delicate fingers with skin that seemed to shimmer in the pale sunlight, and squeezed gently. He pointed to himself, then to her, then to the setting sun and rising sun, trying to convey tomorrow. Understanding flickered across her features, followed by something that looked like relief mixed with hope. As he prepared to leave, Marcus activated a small heating unit and left it with her, along with extra food and water. He showed her how to use his emergency beacon if she was in immediate danger. Walking back toward base, Marcus found himself already planning his return, already thinking of ways to extend his patrols. He told himself it was about first contact, protocol, about gathering intelligence on a new species. But when he remembered the way she'd said his name, like it was something precious, he knew he was lying to himself. Forbidden territory. 3 days had passed since Marcus first found Zara, and each night he'd returned to their makeshift camp under the pretense of extended reconnaissance. Their communication had evolved into a complex dance of words, gestures, and shared understanding that transcended language barriers. Marcus, Commander Hayes called as he prepared for another patrol. Your reports have been light on details lately. The sector you've been covering, anything unusual? Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Negative, sir. Just standard geological formations. Some interesting ice caves that might make good emergency shelters. Hayes studied him with sharp eyes. Take Rodriguez with you today. 2 sets of eyes are better than 1. Marcus's heart sank, but he nodded. Yes, sir. When he reached the usual rendezvous point with Rodriguez in tow, Zara was nowhere to be seen. Marcus's chest tightened with worry until he spotted a small pile of stones arranged in a pattern she'd taught him, her way of saying, "Follow me." What's that? Rodriguez asked, pointing at the stones. Probably just wind patterns, Marcus replied, casually scattering them. Let's check the northern ridge. He led Rodriguez away from Zara's location, conducting a thorough but meaningless patrol. When they returned to base hours later, Marcus volunteered for night watch, knowing it would give him a chance to slip away. He found Zara waiting in a new location, a hidden valley she'd discovered, sheltered from wind and invisible from the main roads. She'd built a more permanent shelter using salvaged materials and natural formations. "Safe," she said in English, gesturing around the valley. Then she took his hand and led him to something that made his breath catch. Partially buried in the snow was a piece of technology unlike anything human. Sleek, crystalline, with surfaces that seemed to bend light. Zara knelt beside it and placed her hands on its surface. Faint symbols appeared, pulsing weakly. "Home," she said, pointing to the device, then to the sky. "Speak. Family." Marcus understood. It was a communication beacon, but it was damaged. She showed him the fractured sections, the dark crystals that should have been glowing. With gestures and her growing English vocabulary, she explained that if they could repair it, her people would know where to find her. Over the next hour, Marcus examined the device with his engineer's training. Some components seemed similar to human technology while others defied understanding. But the power source that he might be able to help with. "I can try," he said, pointing to himself, then the beacon. "But I need tools, equipment from my base." Zara's eyes widened. She understood the implication. He'd have to steal military equipment to help her. She shook her head and backed away, speaking rapidly in her own language. Even without understanding the words, he could hear her distress. "Zara," he said, reaching for her hands. When she looked at him, he saw fear in her silver blue eyes, not for herself, but for him. "I choose this." She searched his face, then whispered, "Why?" Marcus had been asking himself the same question. Why risk his career, his freedom, potentially his life? Looking at her now, this being from another world who'd somehow become the most important thing in his, the answer was simple. "Because you matter," he said. "Because when I'm with you, I remember what it means to be human." Tears formed in her eyes and she pressed her forehead against his. In that moment, the cold, the danger, the impossible situation, none of it mattered. There was only this. Two hearts beating in sync across the vastness of space and circumstance. That night, as they lay together in their shared sleeping bag, Marcus made plans to acquire what they needed. He was crossing a line from which there might be no return. But as Zara's breathing steadied against his chest, he knew he'd already made his choice the moment he'd first pulled her from the snow. The choice. Marcus's hands trembled as he disabled the security lock on the equipment locker. 3 weeks of careful observation had revealed the guard rotations, the blind spots in surveillance, and the precise 17-minute window when he could access the advanced repair tools Zara's beacon needed. The power cells alone were worth a court-martial if discovered missing. The quantum resonance calibrator could get him charged with treason. But as he slipped the equipment into his pack, all he could think about was the hope in Zara's eyes when she'd pointed to the stars and whispered, "Family." He made it back to the hidden valley just as the first searchlights began sweeping the perimeter. Commander Hayes had finally noticed the pattern in his absences. "Marcus!" Zara emerged from the shelter, her face lighting up at the sight of him, then immediately clouding with concern. "Danger?" "Yes," he said, unpacking the stolen equipment. "We have to work fast." For the next 6 hours, they labored over the beacon. Marcus connected human power cells to alien circuitry, while Zara sang to the crystals. Literally sang, her voice causing the dormant components to resonate and glow. It was unlike anything in human science, yet somehow it worked. "There, Marcusy," said as the final connection sparked to life. The beacon pulsed with increasing intensity, its crystalline surface casting rainbow patterns across the snow. Zara pressed her hands to the device and spoke in her melodic language. Symbols flowed across its surface like liquid light. Then she gasped, pressing her ear to the beacon. "Response," she whispered in English, tears streaming down her face. They answer." The joy in her voice was infectious, but Marcus felt his heart breaking even as he smiled. Success meant losing her. She worked frantically with the beacon, transmitting coordinates and status updates. Then she turned to him, her expression radiant with hope and torn with sorrow. 2 days, she said, holding up 2 fingers. Ship comes. 2 days. Before Marcus could respond, the distant sound of engines filled the air. Search drones. His unit had found his trail. Through the valley entrance, he could see lights sweeping methodically across the terrain. You must go, Zara said urgently, pushing him toward the valley's rear exit. They find you. She made a gesture across her throat. Marcus shook his head. I'm not leaving you. Marcus, no. She grabbed his uniform, desperation in her voice. You save me. I not let them hurt you for this. The drone sounds grew closer. Soon they'd detect the beacon's energy signature. Marcus had maybe minutes before discovery. Zara pressed something into his hand, a small crystal pendant that pulsed with warm light. My heart, she said, touching his chest, then her own. Always with you. Zara. She silenced him with a kiss that tasted of starlight, and tears of impossible love and inevitable goodbye. When they broke apart, she whispered words in her own language that needed no translation. I love you too, he whispered back. The searchlights crested the valley ridge. Zara shoved him toward the hidden exit with surprising strength. Go. Promise. Me. Live. Marcus ran, the crystal burning warm against his palm, her voice echoing in his ears as the drones discovered their camp. Behind him, he heard Zara speaking rapidly to the beacon, transmitting final messages to her people. As he reached the valley's edge, Marcus turned back once. Through the swirling snow, he could see Zara standing beside the glowing beacon, facing the approaching search team with quiet dignity. She looked up at the sky, then toward where he'd vanished, and pressed her hand to her heart. Marcus disappeared into the night, carrying her love like a flame in the darkness, knowing that in 2 days she'd be gone forever. 2 paths. Converge. Marcus sat in the detention cell, the crystal pendant hidden beneath his uniform, its gentle warmth the only comfort in the cold military holding facility. Through the small window, he could see the alien ship, sleek and luminescent, like Zara herself, hovering above the valley where they'd shared their impossible love. Commander Hayes entered with 2 military investigators. Lieutenant Kane, you're facing charges of theft of military property, violation of first contact protocols, and potential treason. The missing equipment was found at an unauthorized alien communication site. Marcus remained silent, watching the ship through the window. Somewhere aboard, Zara was safe with her people, and that knowledge made everything else bearable. The alien has requested to speak with you, Hayes continued, his voice carefully neutral. Claims you saved her life during the storm, is that accurate? Yes, sir. And did you willingly provide her with stolen military equipment? Marcus met his commander's eyes. I helped a refugee contact her family. Nothing more. Hours later, they brought him to the communication chamber where a holographic image of Zara appeared. She looked different, healthier, wearing flowing robes that shimmered like captured starlight, but her silver blue eyes held the same warmth he remembered. Marcus, she said, and the sound of his name in her voice made his chest ache. Are you safe? He asked, ignoring the officials surrounding them. Yes, my people. Grateful. They want. She paused, searching for the English words. They want, give you, gift, honor. An older alien appeared beside her in the hologram. Clearly, someone of importance based on the deference shown by Zara's posture. When he spoke, his voice was deeper than Zara's but held the same musical quality. Lieutenant Kane, the alien said in perfect English. I am Counsel Elder Varix. My daughter speaks truth. You saved her life at great cost to yourself. Daughter. Marcus glanced at Zara, understanding now why her rescue had been so important. Your world and ours stand at crossroads, Elder Varix continued. War threatens because of misunderstanding, fear. But you showed different path. You showed what could be. Commander Hayes stepped forward. With respect, we appreciate your gratitude, but Lieutenant Kane violated several. We offer exchange, Elder Varix interrupted. Your Lieutenant Kane, if he chooses, may come with us. Learn our ways, serve as ambassador between worlds. In return, we offer knowledge, medical advances, technology that could benefit both our peoples. The room fell silent. Marcus stared at the hologram, at Zara's face filled with hope and fear. The offer was impossible, unprecedented, and exactly what his heart yearned for. "And if I refuse?" Marcus asked. "Then you face trial here," Hayes said grimly. "The charges are serious, Kane." Zara stepped forward in the hologram. "Marcus," she said softly, "choose for you, not for me. What makes your heart complete?" He thought of his life on Earth, duty, routine, following orders in an endless cycle of military service. Then he thought of lying in that sleeping bag with Zara, feeling more alive and human than he ever had before. "I need a moment," Marcus said. They left him alone with the hologram. Zara pressed her hand against what would have been the barrier between them, and Marcus placed his palm against it. "If I come," he said quietly, "could we?" "My people mate for life," Zara whispered. "When hearts touch as ours have, it is forever." Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the crystal pendant warm against his chest. When he opened them, his decision was clear. "Commander Hayes," he called. When the officials returned, Marcus stood straight, every inch the soldier he'd always been. "I accept the exchange." 2 hours later, Marcus stood on the transport pad, his few personal possessions in a small bag. The alien ship's bay was filled with soft, organic light that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Zara was waiting for him, no longer a hologram, but real, solid, beautiful. She wore simple traveling clothes and carried what looked like an enlarged version of their old sleeping bag. "For cold nights," she said with a shy smile. "Together." As the ship lifted off from Arcturus 7, Marcus took Zara's hand and looked back at the frozen world where they'd found each other. Two hearts, from different worlds brought together by a storm, choosing love over everything else. "Ready for adventure?" Zara asked as the stars opened before them. Marcus squeezed her hand, feeling the crystal pendant pulse in rhythm with their joined heartbeats. "With you? I've been ready since that first night." The ship turned toward the stars, carrying them, toward a future that would rewrite the relationship between two worlds. A future born from one sleeping bag and two hearts that refused to beat apart.